Hey there, Christophe from the French Herbal. There are plants that bring back childhood memories, and for me, mullein is one of those plants. I remember playing amongst the dry stalks in the winter, and we would snap them in half and turn them into swords, making up stories about dragons hiding behind the clusters of evergreen oaks, like over here in my native Provence. Of course, back then I had no idea that this tall medicinal plant actually helps us to fight fire. Well, not dragon fire, but inflammation. So in this episode, we're going to talk about mulleins. Pretty much all mulleins share similar properties, but we'll focus on the common mullein, also known as Our Lady's Candle here in France, the species that became the symbol of the whole mullein family, Verbascum thapsus. And sorry, I'm having a bit of a hard time to pronounce mullein, so forgive me. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder, I'm not a doctor, a pharmacist, or a healthcare professional. I'm here to share with you my passion for medicinal plants, and nothing I say is meant to replace medical care or to serve as diagnosis or prescription. And that's especially important since we'll be touching on certain conditions like asthma that do require a proper medical follow-up. That being said, let's talk about the plant first from a botanical perspective. So mullein is a biennial plant from the figwort family, the Scrophulariaceae. Sorry, a bit of a barbaric name. Its scientific name is Verbascum thapsus. It lives for 2 years and you'll probably find it where you live. It grows in many countries, and if you don't find Verbascum thapsus, you'll probably come across other kinds of mulleins. Most other Verbascum species are also medicinal, like Verbascum densiflorum, Verbascum phlomoides, Verbascum nigrum, etc., etc., many others. Pierre Liotagui, one of our great ethnobotanists here in France, reminds us that all of these species crossbreed very easily, which makes the Verbascum genus a real headache for botanists. In the video version of this episode, I show you a beautiful mullein growing in my region called Verbascum boeravi, right? So many mulleins. Bottom line, if it's a mullein, if it looks like a mullein, it's most likely medicinal. That said, always check what grows locally in your area and try to identify plants with precision. So during its first year, in spring and summer, mullein will form a rosette of leaves that stay close to the ground. The leaves are oval, pointed, and fairly large. They're a soft green color. They're thick yet flexible and velvety to the touch. And if you look closely, you'll see that they're covered in tiny white hairs. The leaves are surprisingly resistant to winter cold, and you can sometimes find them still intact under the snow. The following spring, a single central stalk will shoot up, and the leaves are largest at the base, and they get smaller and smaller as they climb around the flowering stem. Not all the flowers on a common mullein stalk will bloom at the same time, which makes harvesting a bit tricky, right? Because a few will open and fade while most of the others are still waiting their turn or they have already bloomed. So if you want to gather a good amount of flowers, you'll have to come back several times, or you have to be around a good colony of mulleins. The flowers are bright yellow with a 5-petaled corolla, 5 stamens, the 3 upper ones shorter and hairy, and the 2 lower ones longer. They're rich in nectar and a favorite of bees and other pollinators. At the end of its second year, the plant dies, right? Leaving behind those straight brown stalks that stand through the winter. The dried stems vary in height depending on the species and where you live. Here in Provence, they tend to stay fairly short due to the heat and the lack of water. The seed capsules are tough and they split open with 2 tiny valves, releasing the tiny seeds near the parent plant, right? That's why you'll often find new mulleins growing in the same area the following year. I mean, not exactly in the same spot as the mother plant, but not far away. Now let's talk about harvesting. When it comes to which part of the plant to use, every part of mullein is valuable. The flowers are very well known in herbalism. the leaves a little less, and the roots not at all. And we'll see in a minute how to use the different parts. The flowers dry fairly well, although they tend to absorb moisture because they're rich in mucilage, right? So once they're dry, you will have to store them in a cool and dry place. Using a dehumidifier in your storage area is always a good idea, especially if you live in a humid region. But even in dry places like where I live, on a rainy day like this, a dehumidifier can be quite useful depending on the weather. As for the leaves, we usually harvest them during the first year of the plant, because by the second year, most of the plant's energy and therefore its active constituents will move up into the flowering stalk, right? So best to pick on the first year rosette, and you can pick just a few nice and big leaves from each rosette, right? That's enough for your harvest, and it should not weaken the plant too much. The leaves are large and they can be cut into small pieces for herbal teas, and you can do that with a pair of scissors. The tea must be well filtered to remove the irritating hair, right? Sorry, but I'll be repeating this point more than once in this episode. If the dried leaves start to darken over the months of storage, they may have reabsorbed too much moisture, and the darker color is a sign of premature aging. So if that happens, they go to the compost pile. The roots, which are used in American herbalism, we'll see how in a few minutes, should be dug up in the fall or the winter of the plant's first year, when all the energy has returned to the roots, right? And the plant has a deep taproot, like a big carrot with a few side branches, and it can be quite difficult to gather in dry and compacted soil. So it's best to harvest the root the day after a good rain, right? When the soil is soft. Sometimes you'll find roots that have been partially eaten by worms, right? So when you're done brushing and cleaning them with water, slice the roots lengthwise to check for any larvae and remove them if you see them. If the root is too damaged, well, it goes to the compost pile. Once it's all clean, you can dry the roots to use later for tincturing or for decoction. Unlike the flowers or the leaves, the roots don't reabsorb moisture easily. In terms of constituents, taste and energetics. So the flowers and the leaves contain a lot of mucilage, especially in the flowers. They contain flavonoids like verbascoside and hesperidin. They contain iridoids like aucubin and harpagosides, which are also found in devil's claw and figwort. Tells you a bit about the anti-inflammatory power of mullein. We can find lignans, we can find saponins in small amounts, likely more concentrated in the leaves than in the flowers. Okay? The flowers have this sweet and slimy taste that is so typical of very mucilaginous flowers. The leaves are a little salty, a little bitter, and the overall energetics is cooling and moistening. Hey, just a quick pause to let you know you can grab my free ebook on preparing herbal teas for the 4 seasons. It's full of simple recipes and blends you can make with herbs you can buy or even grow almost anywhere. The link is right below this episode. Go check it out. So, what can you do with mullein exactly? First, please make sure that you filter any preparation made with mullein flowers or leaves to remove the tiny white hair. Otherwise, you could end up irritating instead of soothing. So, the flower is the best known part in our herbal tradition, but the leaf can also be a substitute. And whenever that's the case, I'll try to mention it. As for the root, that's an American herbal use. We don't use that at all in France, but we'll talk about it too. So let's start with the respiratory tract and the throat, where mullein has been used since ancient times. A tea made from the flowers or the leaves help to calm inflammation and soothe a tickling or burning sensation in the throat. Sometimes that irritation starts as a nervous cough, but over time a vicious circle sets in, right? The throat becomes red and inflamed, and the itching, which is really inflammation, triggers more coughing. And the more you cough, the worse it gets, right? And sometimes it can start after a speaking engagement for some people, or a singing session for singers. Ideally, we want to calm that inflammation before it worsens and turns into an infection, since irritated mucous membranes are more vulnerable to infections, right? So we're dealing with a dry, irritative cough here. And mullein will act as an emollient herb, soothing the heat, soothing the inflammation of the dry mucous membrane thanks to its mucilage and other compounds like flavonoids. Children are especially prone to those tickly coughs because they cannot resist coughing, right? They cannot stop, which only makes things worse. These nervous inflammatory coughs often show up at night, much to the despair of parents, right? Sometimes a cold is involved and post-nasal drip, right? So mucus draining from the nose into the throat area will keep irritating the throat. You will also see this kind of dry cough with seasonal allergies or acid reflux too, right? You can do that. And in those cases, you could add plantain leaves to the tea, since plantain will help calm histamine type reactions. For kids with a sore, scratchy throat, there's an old traditional French recipe. You heat up some milk, you add a good pinch of mullein flowers, you cover, let it steep for about 20 minutes, you strain carefully, and you add a spoonful of honey, and you give it to the child to drink warm, right? A sip at a time, often during the day. If you don't want to use cow's milk, it could be almond milk or other type of milk. Dr. Cazin, a well-known 19th century rural physician here in France, he wrote that he used a tea of mullein flowers combined with licorice juice or honey. And you can easily see why, right? Licorice is also very emollient, very soothing, anti-inflammatory. And honey adds a soothing and calming effect too. So to summarize, this first use of mullein is for dry, irritative coughs without mucus being expelled, without an infection, or without a deeper congestion in the lungs, okay? Now let's move a bit deeper down in the chest, what we might call an old cough. So what's an old cough? Well, sometimes bronchitis or another type of lung infection doesn't clear up completely and it becomes kind of chronic. So over time, the lungs kind of dry out as the mucous membranes lose their ability to produce healthy liquid mucus. And at that stage, the goal is to bring back moisture, thanks to the mucilage, but also to help loosen up and expel the remaining thick and dry mucus. And that's what we call a mucolytic and expectorant action of plants. So mullein tea does both. It adds moisture through its mucilage, and the leaf, more than the flower, has a gentle expectorant effect, probably due to its saponin content. And for even better results, you combine mullein with thyme or with hyssop or eucalyptus. If you have some elecampane roots, very good too. Careful, it's quite strong as well, so you don't need to put a lot. And ideally you start with a decoction of the elecampane roots in a covered pan, then you stop the heat and then remove the lid, add the other plants like mullein, right? And then let infuse for another 10 minutes. More on elecampane in another episode. You can also use dried pine or fir buds for a strong expectorant action thanks to the resins combined with mullein. And well, you can keep it simple, right? And mullein plus thyme tea filtered should work beautifully well in this context. And you drink it regularly throughout the day for several days until that old mucus starts to clear up, right? Starts to be expelled and your breathing feels much lighter. The same type of mix can be prepared for the morning productive cough of the smoker or the morning cough of COPD. Why morning cough? Well, because the cilia of the lungs are damaged, right? There's an accumulation of mucus during the night. The ciliary clearance is dysfunctional. And if you have never seen those tiny cilia in the lung in action, bringing back mucus up, watch a video, it's just fascinating. So in our situation, mucus builds up during the night, right? And in the morning, the person has to expectorate, okay? Mullein and other plants like thyme, hyssop, etc. could help. Mullein is also often mentioned for asthma, particularly the flower, but I find that the leaf is even better. The classical British author Maud Grieve noted in her day that some asthmatics would smoke mullein leaves and experience quick relief. And yeah, I agree, not the best delivery method, but it shows the plant's effect. Dr. Leclerc, a respected French herbal doc, wrote, "I have seen elderly asthmatic patients relieved by this tea, which seems to exert a mild narcotic action." And here narcotic doesn't mean like an opiate, right? It means sedative or soothing. In other words, the plant appears to calm the nervous excitability, especially the kind that contributes to bronchial spasm and coughing. Interesting, right? For asthma, you might also think of plantain, hyssop, elecampane again, and also astragalus, right? Astragalus is very good here. A tea blend, for instance, could be 1/3 mullein leaves, 1/3 plantain leaves, 1/3 hyssop flowering tops, 1 good tablespoon of the mix per cup, well filtered for the hairs, plus astragalus root taken separately, maybe as a powder mixed into applesauce, for instance. Other lung conditions involving tightness or shortness of breath, like emphysema, can also benefit from mullein leaf, ideally again combined with other supporting herbs. In the past, in France, if you went to a herbal store for such issues, you might have been offered the 4-flower pectoral tea. It was a traditional mix of mullein, poppy, mallow, and coltsfoot flowers. And there was also the 7-flower tea, which was a richer version that added marshmallow, cat's foot, and violet flowers. And these blends were as beautiful as they were effective, filling your cup with a colorful mix of petals. Okay, now let's talk about earaches and middle ear infections. Here we use the flowers. And I learned this remedy during my years in the US, and it's a true classic. First, you make an infused oil from mullein flowers. You'll want to prepare that ahead of time so it's ready in your cupboards when needed. When the time comes, you pour a small amount of that infused oil into a tablespoon and you gently warm it over a flame, not too hot. Then you add freshly grated garlic, just a little bit. You stir for a few seconds in the warm oil. This will release the garlic's active compounds, which are strongly antimicrobial. You strain it, you soak a small piece of cotton in the warm oil, and you place it gently at the opening of the sore ear. Some people use a dropper to put 1 or 2 drops directly deep into the ear canal, and you can repeat the application as needed, and then rest the ear against something warm, like a hot water bottle, for extra comfort. And the eardrum should not be perforated if you do this, right? So you got to check that. All right, let's move on to the urinary tract. And I think we're going to discuss properties you might not be familiar with. Here we'll refer to the indications given by Cazin, our beloved French country doctor from the 1800s, and Michael Moore, one of the American herbalists behind the revival of herbal medicine starting in the 1970s. Cazin recommends a tea of mullein flowers for acute conditions of the urinary tract, such as cystitis, when the person feels the urge to urinate but cannot because of burning pain, right? With urine that is thin and scanty, in Cazin's word. And he notes that mullein makes the urine clear and abundant. And here we see diuretic and emollient properties on inflamed tissues. The leaf can be substituted for the flowers in this case, and please go see a doctor to ensure that cystitis does not turn into pyelonephritis, which is a very serious condition. Let's turn to Michael Moore now, who recommends the root. That's an important distinction. We're talking about the roots here. And I've never seen this indication mentioned elsewhere. So incontinence in general, or nocturnal due to chronic cystitis. Functional incontinence caused by lack of tone in the bladder muscles, right? So the smooth muscles of the bladder are too weak. Incontinence provoked by physical strain, like violent coughing, or lifting a heavy weight, or laughter, or running. Incontinence in children due to insufficient bladder tone, especially when the problem persists beyond age 4. And finally, children who constantly feel the need to urinate, say every 30 minutes, and therefore they cannot undertake a long trip. So the condensed version of all of this from Michael Moore is pretty much, if there is incontinence, think of mullein root. Give it a try. Okay, on my website, in the article linked to this episode, I also give you a list of miscellaneous uses for mullein, right? Go check it out if you're interested. In terms of forms and quantities, for the tea of the dried flowers or leaves, traditional sources in France recommend 30 grams per liter of tea, which is about 1 ounce of dried plant per quart of water for you American folks, right? 2 to 3 cups a day, that's a lot of plant. There's a simple homemade method with a lighter touch. 1 tablespoon of the dried flowers or the finely cut leaves per cup. If you use other herbs in your mix, you use less mullein to leave room for the other plants in the mix, right? Important, strain the tea through a coffee filter or a fine cloth to remove the tiny hairs which can irritate the throat. And here's a funny anecdote from Dr. Leclerc. For neglecting this precaution, I once drew the reproaches of a patient who came to consult me for a pharyngitis accompanied by unpleasant tickling. I had prescribed him a tea of Verbascum thapsus, and he asked me, in a slightly bitter tone, whether it was fashionable to make people swallow itching powder. Okay? To prepare the decoction of the dried roots, we use Michael Moore's instruction, and Moore mentions a concentrated decoction with a dose of 60 to 90 milliliter per dose. Right? It's very precise. He doesn't specify the amount of dried root required, but since he usually recommends 30 grams per liter for a normal decoction, which is an ounce a quart, then we could speculate that a concentrated decoction would require maybe 40 to 50 grams of dried roots per liter. For the tincture, preferably made from the leaves, fresh or dried, because the flowers are delicate and mucilaginous, and tincturing them is less suitable, right? An infusion, a tea, is generally better, though tinctures of the flowers do exist on the market, okay? A tincture of the root can also be prepared for Moore's indication. The dosage of the leaf tincture would be about 30 to 40 drops per dose as a starting point. Probably similar dosage for the root tincture. The last preparation I'd like to mention, the macerated oil made from the dried leaves or flowers used topically as a soothing preparation for inflamed skin. In terms of precautions, nothing to report apart from making sure to strain infusions or any other preparation thoroughly to avoid the irritating effect of the hairs. Severe inflammation in the mouth or the throat can occur if the tea is not properly filtered, and the same applies to the macerated oil. Well, that's it for mullein. What a great medicinal plant. It has served many generations before us and will continue to do so in the future. Thanks for being here. See you very soon for the next episode of The French Herbal.